Growing up, my home environment was different from what many people might consider typical. My parents were openly affectionate with one another, and my mother, who spent most of her time at home, was comfortable with her own body in a way that was entirely natural to her. For her, nudity was not something to hide or attach shame to, it was simply a state of being. My father, on the other hand, had a long-standing interest in adult magazines, with shelves and boxes filled with decades of back issues stored away in the attic. For many years, these were simply part of the background of the house, objects I noticed but did not fully understand. As I grew older and began exploring the attic on my own, curiosity eventually led me to those boxes. Leafing through the magazines was a moment of genuine surprise. Until then, my understanding of the female form had been shaped almost entirely by familiarity. Seeing my mother as she was confident, unself-conscious, and constant had created a narrow sense of what was normal. What struck me most while looking through those old magazines was not the content itself, but the realization that people's bodies could be so varied. There were countless shapes, features, and expressions, all different from one another. That discovery quietly expanded my understanding of human diversity in a way I hadn't anticipated. Looking back, I can see that this realization wasn't really about the magazines at all. It was about perspective. Growing up in a household that treated the human body casually had removed some of the mystery, but it also delayed my awareness of just how broad and varied human experience could be. That moment marked an early step in understanding that the world and the people in it was far larger and more diverse than the small, familiar space I had known. The older issues were relatively restrained when compared to the kind of material that is widely available in print and online today. At the time, limited nudity, such as bare chests and natural body features, was considered acceptable and even mainstream. There were clear boundaries, however, and imagery that was too revealing or graphic was generally discouraged and often rejected outright. Those publications reflected the cultural standards of their era, when suggestion and subtlety were more important than explicit display. What passed as bold then would likely seem modest by modern standards, especially given how dramatically expectations and norms have shifted over the years. The contrast highlights not only changes in media, but also broader shifts in attitudes toward exposure, privacy, and what is considered acceptable for public consumption. I studied every photograph in those magazines with careful attention. I removed the centerfold pages and placed them neatly at the bottom of a box filled with comic books. Hidden beneath the stack, they remained untouched and unseen by anyone else. No one but me ever looked through them, and the pictures stayed safely tucked away, protected under the weight of the comics above. My father worked for a bank and was transferred to a different branch every few years. Each move came with a promotion and a pay raise, which made the situation a bit of a mixed blessing. On one hand, the advances brought greater stability and opportunity for our family. On the other, the frequent relocations meant constantly adjusting to new places, schools, and routines. While the changes were not always easy, they were part of the path that shaped our family's experiences and resilience. The new house, new to us, at least, sat at the end of the street on one side, facing a row of houses across the road, with a river running behind them. It felt a little tucked away, almost like the street ended just for us. The house had 3 bedrooms on the main floor, along with a combined kitchen and dining area, a front living room, a laundry room, and a bathroom. Everything upstairs felt practical and well laid out, designed for everyday family life. Downstairs, however, was where the house truly opened up. There was a spacious family room, an office, and another laundry area that was far larger than the one upstairs. In addition, there was a large recreation room that seemed full of possibilities. At one end of that recreation room was a small space branching off from the main area. It had no door and not even a door frame, making it clear that it was never intended to be a bedroom. Still, the moment I saw it, I claimed it as my own personal recreation space. Because there was no door to provide privacy, my parents agreed that the room wasn't suitable for anyone else's use and allowed my claim to stand. It became my little corner of the house, a space that felt uniquely mine from the very beginning. The house had no attic, so all of the extra boxes were stored at the far end of the recreation room, well away from the area I had claimed as my own. That arrangement worked out perfectly for me. I could go through the boxes of comics and the adult magazines without ever worrying about being discovered. Although the recreation room did have a door, closing it would only have raised questions, and I was careful to avoid drawing attention. The boxes of comics and magazines were stacked right beside one another, making it easy to pull out a small stack of comics whenever I needed a convenient cover. Everything was close at hand, and I could explore my collections quietly and without suspicion. New issues of those magazines continued to arrive every month without fail. Whenever a fresh issue appeared, the older ones were usually gathered up and stored away in boxes. That arrangement suited me perfectly. It meant there was always something new to discover, while the earlier editions quietly accumulated nearby, preserved and untouched. Over time, I began to notice changes not just in the magazines themselves, but in the way I viewed them. What once seemed like ordinary publications gradually took on a different significance as I grew older and more aware. The images became more detailed, the presentation more open, and the overall tone less restrained than it had been in earlier years. These shifts didn't happen all at once, but slowly enough that they felt almost natural, mirroring my own gradual transition from childhood curiosity to a more mature understanding of the world. For one thing, both magazines were featuring far more revealing imagery than before, with a much stronger emphasis on intimate detail. In Penthouse in particular, it was increasingly common for photographs to leave very little to the imagination, often presenting models in fully exposed and unfiltered poses. The overall tone felt bolder and more unapologetic than in earlier issues, reflecting a clear shift in how openly the human body was being presented. For reasons I did not yet understand, I found myself studying the more revealing photographs with greater attention. I also began reading the written columns in the magazine's sections I had previously ignored entirely. Now, they offered an intimate and thought-provoking education that went beyond the images alone. The letters pages were especially compelling. Real people wrote in with genuine questions, and those questions were answered thoughtfully by real women. Reading those exchanges was enlightening. The honesty of the concerns, combined with the clarity and confidence of the responses, provided insight and understanding that I had not encountered before. In many ways, the advice itself became an education, shaping my awareness as much as anything else in the magazines. I began reading every column in both magazines, starting with the oldest issues that had been stored away and working my way forward until I finally caught up to the current editions. They were always hidden beneath my parents' bed, hardly an effective hiding place, especially for a curious teenage boy. After spending time reading the articles and studying the photographs, I was careful to return the magazines to their original spot, placing them back under the bed exactly as I had found them. No trace of my discovery remained, and the routine continued unnoticed. At night, I would drift off to sleep with a vivid collage of beauty and imagination playing softly behind my closed eyes. Those quiet, private daydreams seemed to ease my mind, and I always slept soundly as a result.